And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman, your host and purveyor at whiskeypolitics.net. You can find us on America's Voice News and YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. And all of your audio podcasts, including the Ricochet Audio Network and iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. Sometimes we talk about politics, sometimes we talk about culture. And I'm delighted to be sitting here today on a beautiful evening with Brian Roberts, a journeyman producer, a director, a writer, and you told me a cigar smuggler.
One time.
Well,
many times.
When
we don't.
Cigar smuggling was actually like considered verboten.
It was when it was considered cool.
You directed, you've produced a lot of television shows here in Hollywood, right behind us,
yes,
including Everybody Loves Raymond. What other huge shows have you been doing?
Let's see. I did the Drew Carey show. I did Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Most recently, I've done Odd Squad, which is an Emmy Award-winning show for PBS.
Right.
I was on The Simpsons, the first year of Entertainment Tonight, first and second year of Max Headroom. God rest the show.
That was back in the 80s.
Yeah, that was, well, actually, that was sort of my first kind of my, I kind of have a, you know, that was my entree into The Simpsons, actually,
okay,
oddly enough, yeah.
Yeah.
But, you know, I was lucky enough that when I was a little kid, I was in second grade, I got plucked out of a lineup by Michael Landon. I started as an actor, believe it or not.
Oh.
And I got plucked out of a lineup by Michael Landon, and he put me in a thing called Lauren Green's American West, and I got to spend like 6 days on location at the Paramount Ranch, and I got a whole new mom, like a beautiful new mom, and I was like on the cover of TV Guide when I was like in second grade, and
right,
and that sort of like just got me hooked on the business, and I loved it, you know, from that moment on. It was amazing.
Lauren Green and Michael Landon. I mean, these guys are frontiermen as far as Hollywood is concerned. Little House on the Prairie and Gunsmoke and all these shows that they did. And the Paramount Ranch is still active.
Yes.
Still doing HBO shows up there.
Yeah.
They've got a lot going on.
Well, it's crazy because as a you know, a kid in the second grade, you get plucked out of your elementary school, and I didn't know what to do. And the funny story is that you know, I peed in my pants. And well, I was an extra, and they didn't have enough changes of wardrobe, so I had to hold a hat in front of my crotch for like 2 days.
We're still talking about you in second grade, right?
Yeah, this is in second grade. Yeah, no, I peed in my pants much later on, but it's funny because like that ignited like an interest in show business, and then when I was about 10 or 12, my mom knew somebody at CBS Television City, and I was able to sit in the booth while they were doing, I don't know if you remember the show Maude. It was sort of the partner show to All in the Family.
Right, right.
And it's actually one of those lessons that I learned, like a broadcast network lesson I learned really early on. I sat in the booth, and you know, the whole thing was that B. Arthur and her husband would argue all the time.
Yeah.
And they're arguing, and the phone rang, and she picks up the phone. It was a sales call. She goes, "I don't have time to talk to you right now. I'm at an orgy, and I only have one hand free for the phone." She hangs up the phone. And then they go on with the scene, and I'm in the booth, and I see this little man walk out, like about 30, 40 seconds later, and whisper in B. Arthur's ear. Yeah. And she has a total shit fit. Like throwing stuff and whatever. What are you talking about? About a mother, that. And it turns out that they had cut the joke. The network had cut the joke. And the guy who walked out was a guy by the name of Abby Singer, who was a very famous first AD, and he actually has a shot named after him. It's called the Abbey, which is the shot before the last shot. And so I learned at a very young age, like what you know, network censorship was all about, and I was 10, and I remembered that joke, and then when I created and executive produced a series with Dave Foley, I was able to work that joke into a show.
Kids in the Hall?
No, it was called Spun Out. We did it in Canada.
Okay. Yeah.
And so anyway, so I held on to that joke from the age of 10 years old to like way later in my life, and I found an opportunity to squeeze that joke in just to kind of like, okay, the network censorship has changed a lot, so and we got it in, got a huge laugh, and I was kind of tip the hat to B. Arthur and the writer whoever wrote the joke. Yeah,
yeah. So you started in the 80s. You obviously had some of the most successful television shows in sitcom history. I mean, you're talking about Everybody Loves Raymond. You're a good friend with Romano, correct?
Yeah, we're golf buddies.
Golf buddies.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to say that I'm like Zelig. I don't know if you remember the Woody Allen movie Zelig.
Yeah.
I've been adjacent to great moments in history in terms of show business and just in general. Like, you know, right out of high school, I got a job at a nightclub in Huntington Beach called the Golden Bear. And I lied about my age. I was 15. I told them I was 18. So they hired me as the dishwasher. I ended up as the cook. And next thing you know, I'm getting stoned with Jerry Garcia. I'm hanging out with B.B. King. You know, I stocked the refrigerator of beer for Charles Bukowski. You know, hung out with Average White Band, Tom Waits. You name it. Anybody who came up when I was in high school, this is like 75, 76, 77, like I was there. And it was like the coolest gig. You know, like I would all week long I'd be at high school, and then on Friday, Saturday nights, I'd drive down to Huntington Beach, and I'd hang out with these really cool people. So when I was 18, they threw me a 21st birthday party. They thought I was 21 when I was only 18.
Right.
So, and the owners were Greek, and they got me drunk on ouzo. And, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, like Jimmy Seals from Seals and Crofts is waking me up, like, because I passed out in one of the dressing rooms, and Jimmy Seals is saying, "Hey, Brian, you got to go home." But they knew me as the cook, and it was cool. I didn't know who Jerry Garcia was when I was growing up. You know, there were lines around the block, and then, you know, he'd come in, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, he'd put his pig nose amplifier up on the countertop, plug in, play just for me for 3 hours. You know, and that was really like the beginning of understanding, you know, through my relationship with Jerry, and then later on my relationship with George Carlin, like understanding that true success, it doesn't come from nowhere. I mean, these guys, they practiced, they rehearsed, they were hardworking, they were, you know, engaged. Even though, like, if you think of Jerry Garcia, or you think of George Carlin, you think of the hippy dippy weatherman, or you think of, like, you know, like a stoner or whatever, these guys were really hardworking and sort of, you know, gave me the inspiration, like, hey, you know what? It just doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from really, really hard work. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of a revelation for me, you know, like at 17, 18 years old, to see people that had a public persona, but then when you got to know them up close and personal, it was really quite different.
I think it's the lesson that is missing today, with this sense of entitlement and this instant gratification and the instant fame that we have with social media.
Oh, thank you very much. Right? I totally agree. I was lucky enough to come up in a real apprenticeship. I mean, when you're, you know, going from, you know, hanging out at the Golden Bear, and then first year of Entertainment Tonight, and seeing how things were going, and then first year of The Simpsons, and standing next to people like Sam Simon, Matt Groening, you know, James L. Brooks. You know, I had the keys to the kingdom. Like, you know, I could go watch James L. Brooks direct. I could go watch, you know, Sam Simon write. I was in the writer's room, you know, and hanging out and listening to everybody, you know, throw fastballs at each other. And I go, there is, and the you know, that show is still on the air. Entertainment Tonight's still on the air. Yeah. And I go,
You're referring to The Simpsons.
Pardon me?
Simpsons.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Entertainment Tonight's still on the air.
Right, and The Simpsons.
The Simpsons is still on the air. Right. A lot of shows that started on are still on the air, which is pretty amazing. But yeah, this sort of leapfrogging up to the top now without really kind of understanding from the inside out, at least in my world, like comedy, writing, hard work, you know, directing skills, people skills, you know, all those kinds of things are missing now, because people do have a sense of entitlement, and they do tend to leapfrog up and say, hey, give me what I want now, as opposed to I need to earn it.
This is impacting a lot of our culture, and it's something that I want to get into, especially with how it's impacting not just culture, but the dialogue of today, the politics of today as well. So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back, and we'll be right back with Whiskey Politics. And back with you with Brian Roberts, the You know everybody in this industry. We're talking here about a lot of famous people that everybody that watching has probably at one time in their life watched it. They remember the shows in the 80s, the 90s that you were talking about here. But we're in a really weird place right now, and I want to talk a little bit about your perspective on culture. And we had a really interesting discussion last week, and I thought I wish we had a camera, right? And this is kind of what precipitated this interview. And you were telling me, I understand you have family in Canada, correct?
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and you go back and forth, and you're looking right now at what's happening with Hollywood as far as them moving to Vancouver or Georgia or wherever, the best financial return can be as on investment in that area. What are we seeing right now, first of all, in California, specifically regarding Hollywood, and America, generally speaking, regarding exporting entertainment and the cost of that today?
Well, it's interesting because I think that the United States has finally exported its last great natural resource, which is entertainment. I'm a native Californian. When I saw sitcoms in general and sort of the business kind of flutter out in about 2002, 2003, I saw where everything was going. It was going to Canada. So I left and I immigrated to Canada, and I was kind of shocked to see how many shows really go up there to save money. And it took me a while to learn the system, but if you go up to Canada, right off the bat you're saving almost 30% on the dollar exchange. Right. And then Canada has had this incredibly long-running subsidy program where you can get another 30% off. So you can make a $2 million movie for $1.1 million, or a $10 million movie for $6 million or whatever it is. So the migration of jobs going up to Canada has been amazing. It's Hollywood North. It's runaway production. A lot of other states have tried these kinds of programs, and like say Louisiana or New York or Michigan or whatever. But what ends up happening is that the local economy says this is a great idea, and then they give everybody a lot of money off, and then they find out a year later that it's actually hurting the economy, and then it's over with. So I call it whack-a-mole. You go to Louisiana one year, and then you go to New York the next year, and then you go to Wisconsin, or then you go to New Jersey, or wherever you're going to go, and the programs kind of go in and out. But Canada has had this very robust system for a long time, and I think people would be shocked that are outside of our industry to understand just how much of a job loss and a job drain we've had to Canada and production, because quite frankly, I've been the benefactor of all of it.
How so?
Well, I left here and I walked into Canada and haven't stopped working for 15 years or 12 years or whatever it is.
Okay.
And there's a lot of people here who, I'm a member of the Editors Guild, the Writers Guild, the Directors Guild of America, SAG. I'm also a member of the Directors Guild of Canada, the Writers Guild of Canada, and AFTRA in Canada. And in the United States, when I direct a program, for example, you talk about Everybody Loves Raymond. The show went off the air several years ago. I still get residuals from that program, and so do people that are down the line. Even second ADs and first ADs get their little piece of the pie. In Canada, you direct a show and you don't have residuals. So from a network and studio's point of view, they'd go, well, let's go up to Canada and let's produce shows up there. We can kind of not pay the directors, not pay everybody else. We can get this huge tax break. And so I kind of saw the wave coming, and I hit the crest of the wave and have ridden that wave for a long time. I'm coming back because I see, in fact, one of the big things I see this missing. Go ahead.
Well, my question before you go into why you're coming back here is specifically, what is the genesis? Because are we talking politically? Are we talking about how the studios are structured with the residuals? Where's the big expense coming from?
Well, every studio in the world is looking for a way to make less expensive product.
Okay.
Okay. So if you go to Canada, you can make a $10 million product for roughly $6 million or $5 million. Right. It's like 50% off. So if you were a producer, where would you go? You'd go to Canada. You know, they're the closest English-speaking country, so you can populate it with Canadian actors, and then, you know, have your tentpole large actors, and pay them. But you're paying the Directors Guild of Canada, the Writers Guild of Canada. You're paying like less money up there, and so that's precipitated a large drain in the Hollywood workforce.
Right.
You know, things that nobody even thinks about, sound editing, all this stuff. It's shipped up to Canada. Now, we are outsourcing. We are outsourcing our entire industry.
You're seeing a lot of your friends that have moved, right? They've left California.
There's been several of us, but then I've also seen people that I came up in the business with that can't find a job and moved on to, say, real estate.
Okay.
Because it decimated a lot of the industry. Mm-hmm. So it's just amazing to me that we're talking billions and billions of dollars a year that are being drained out of the United States, specifically out of Hollywood, and being put into another country. Some shows that are for PBS,
yeah,
which I've worked on, and that are shown on PBS and represented as PBS programs, and you turn it on and you go, well, it's actually produced in Canada.
If you could send a message to Washington, to the President, to Congress, is there anything that they could do to prevent this outflow?
Well, yeah. I mean, I said this early on in the Trump administration, is that, you know, when he started talking about, you know, car factories and losing the infrastructure of the United States, I go, well, that means you have to actually build a car factory, you have to do something. I go, the one thing he could have done is tax the imported entertainment from Canada. And it wouldn't cost anybody any money except for possibly producers. I go, you don't have to spend $1 on infrastructure. I go, if a show, for example, the WB, almost every show in the WB is produced in Canada. Mm-hmm. So why are we not taxing that as an import at, say, 30%, so that the playing field becomes equal, and that people in the United States, or specifically Hollywood, are being put back to work, and that you can bring that work back. And I think that there was a great opportunity missed when there were these negotiations with Canada, that entertainment was not put on the table. I was extremely surprised because, you know, I don't know if you know this, but I directed Donald Trump for an episode of the Drew Carey show. And,
okay, I didn't know that. No.
And you know, I got calls from Vanity. People, when he was running for president, they'd call me and like want to know all the dirt on Donald Trump. And basically, I said, I don't have any dirt. He showed up on time. He was a nice guy. He delivered his lines almost okay.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a, hey, this is really cool, and then he went away. So I was really surprised that, being somebody who, you know, especially with The Apprentice and being in the entertainment business, that he didn't identify the one import that is causing a huge job loss in Hollywood, especially since he's had problems with the Hollywood community. I go, how better to ingratiate yourself with the Hollywood community than to possibly bring jobs back and say, hey, you know, enough of exporting, our U.S. jobs to a foreign country.
Right.
Why don't we tax it on the way back in? And so I was really surprised at that, and I tried very hard to get somewhere with it, but never was able to hook up with the right people to put it into the right aisleway for it to get attention. Because to me, it was a no-brainer. You know, you're talking about billions of dollars of that's going out of here and to another country, and could also create jobs back in the United States. So as many jobs as a Ford factory would create, say, in Ohio. So I didn't understand why that opportunity was missed.
There's a political opportunity there as well as an economic one, and I want to get into more details on this after the break coming up here, because, you know, there is such a huge divide in this country right now. And I know, speaking with you, you're no fan of the president, but you take a look from a pragmatic standpoint, don't you?
Yes.
And take a look at what, you know, the power of that office can do for your community, and that would obviously have a beneficial impact on everybody.
Yes.
So we're going to be right back. I want to talk a lot more about this and some other issues right here with Brian Roberts. We'll be right back with Whiskey Politics. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. I'm Dave Sussman. And again, if you haven't hit the subscribe button on YouTube, make sure you do that with the notification bell and find us at America's Voice News. You can download that on Roku and Amazon Prime. No, it's not Amazon Fire. I get confused with those two. And Apple TV. And of course, you can hear our podcast episodes on ricochet.com and all of your favorite podcast applications. Sitting here with Brian Roberts, who is the journeyman director, producer, writer, and cigar smuggler here in Hollywood. I just love the term. I love the term. I was with some friends.
It has a nice ring to it.
Cigars, yeah. And it's a great pastime favorite of mine. Okay, so I kind of lied to everybody at the beginning. I said we don't always talk politics here, sometimes culture, but culture is downstream, or politics is downstream from culture, as Andrew Breitbart once famously said. And so if you were to have the president sitting in front of you right now, and you could say to him, look, there's so many different ways that you could impact the economy in Southern California and in Hollywood, do you think that there is the political will for that? I mean, how many, the hatred coming out of this city specifically for this administration is...
I think actually if he made a move in this direction and was properly coached on how to present it, I think it would go actually a long way to the rank and file people who are working in Los Angeles. I actually do.
Okay.
I think that might...
Behind the camera guys.
Yeah. I think that might actually get some people's attention.
Yeah.
Not only behind the camera guys, I think that people in front of the camera, especially big stars, would have a hard time opposing something like that, because then they might look like that they were supporting exporting product. Mm-hmm. And, you know, hey, look, I just heard recently Ray's show, you know, Get Shorty, which shot in Los Angeles last year, is going up to Vancouver. And Ray's asking me, hey, what do you think of Vancouver? And I was telling him the good places to go and stuff like that. Yeah. I go, but, you know, they're going to save money. So all those people that were working down here in Los Angeles at, I think it was Paramount, they're out of jobs. So those jobs are going up north, and they're going all to my friends up in Canada. Mm-hmm. And so I think that if I was to have the president sitting with me and I was able to present it to him properly, I would say, hey, how about an idea where you could bring jobs back to the United States without spending a dime on infrastructure, without pressuring, you know, somebody to build a plant, to spend a lot of capital. All you have to do is sort of wave. We're in a trade war with China, apparently. I go, why can't we tax the import coming in from Canada that's going on American networks? I don't, like you said, I have a wide range of political beliefs. You know, I'm not a Trumpian. I'm not, I'm a compassionate conservative, you know, or a liberal conservative, whatever you want to call it. But I just don't see why we're not doing it. Doesn't cost a dime, except possibly pulling a little bit of our business, or a lot of our business, back to Hollywood, giving it back to the Directors Guilds, the Editor Guild, all of the guilds that work underneath the bargaining agreements here in Los Angeles. Because basically, it's just a way to save money. And that all being said, I go, there's some things about Canada, if I was to have the presidents here, that I think Canada is doing right that we've got way wrong.
Now, I'm going to assume you're referring to their health
immigration.
Program.
Let me tell you my story, okay? When I'm third generation Californian, when I decided to go to Canada, it took me 2 years, several background checks, a lot of in-depth, background on my bank accounts, my education, all this other stuff. After 2 years with the Canadian immigration, I was finally approved to become a landed immigrant. I go, and then they welcomed me. It took me 15 minutes to become a landed immigrant. Once I crossed the border, they go, bing, bing, thank you very much. You're here, and now welcome to Canada. But the process was incredibly difficult. And so I don't quite understand why we don't tear a page from the Canadian songbook in terms of immigration. I go, Canada's not against people coming, but they want you to pass some metrics. Canada has a quota program. You know, there's a certain amount of exotic dancers that are required every year. There's a certain amount of doctors, professors, whatever, but there's also strippers that are required. These are their, you know, kind of...
it's a meritocracy.
Yeah, but a meritocracy, even being a stripper or whatever, not that I'm denigrating that.
No.
I'm just saying they let them in. It's a quota system. Okay. So what I don't understand is how we've gotten ourselves in this huge immigration mess by not applying some basic logic to immigration, which is like, okay, everybody's welcome, but okay, just step over the line, get in line. Let's check your background. Let's figure out who you are, where you were educated. What do we need? I know somebody who came to the United States as a lion tamer, believe it or not. But I go, why aren't we doing this?
Let me ask you on this, because this is one of the two issues I wanted to discuss with you about Canada and the differences here in the United States, the other being healthcare. We can get into that.
And I want to get into that, yeah.
Okay, but when we're talking about a meritocracy, and Canada isn't the only country in the world that's doing this. You can't get into Australia right away. It's bloody hard to get into Australia. Other countries around the world have the same thing. And here, basically, if you just are able to put a toe on American soil, you're here, and everybody in your family extended.
I got news for you. I'm also I also have my residency in Mexico.
Okay.
You know what?
You have a house.
It was it's just difficult to get into Mexico,
right?
As to get into Canada.
And if you do break the law, they'll put you in jail.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
And I go, how is it harder to get? How is it as an American harder to get into Canada and to Mexico than to come the other way? I don't get it, and I really don't get why my tax dollars are paying for people's services, so they get a tow over here, and then all of a sudden they're in high school.
Most of our audience are nodding their head right now, okay? And then they're thinking, which was going to be my follow-up question, is, okay, but this guy's in Hollywood, and everybody around him is so much against this administration and their immigration policies, and if you come up and you say, well, we need a wall and we need stronger immigration, you're now a xenophobe and a racist and a bigot.
But see, first of all, I hate the wall idea. The wall idea is stupid. I go, all we really need is to tear a page from a socialist country, Canada, and another country where all the immigrants are coming here, where it's harder to go to Mexico than it is to the United States. That's where I say, I go, Canada and Mexico have it right. We've got it wrong. And you're saying that I'm not xenophobic. You know, obviously Canada let me in, and Mexico let me in, but I had to go through a process. Okay, I go, I'm not xenophobic, I'm not racist, I'm not bigoted. I go, however, it does make me angry when my tax dollars are paying for services for people. I'll give you a great example. We're going to transition into the healthcare system.
Yeah, after the break here in a minute. Yep.
Okay, well, just real quickly.
Okay.
If I don't have my landed immigrant card in Canada, I can't do anything. I can't work. I can't see a doctor. I'm basically a non-person. So it's the equivalent to like a national identity card. Mm-hmm. So I don't understand how, you know, my son just took his driver's test, and he was asked, he took his driver's test in California.
Okay.
And he was asked, you know, are you a U.S. citizen? By the way, you don't have to answer this question. Right, and I go, in Canada, I can't get anything without my PR card, my permanent residency card, and now I have citizenship, but I go, I can't get anything without that. So what it means is that even if you tried to go over the border and you put your toe over, you got sick, they would just say, sorry, you're going back. You can't get any public services being a rightfully approved immigrant. So I don't understand it. It's crazy making. And so when people say, not even just Hollywood or other people, and by the way, I'm pretty super liberal. I'm a liberal guy. I go, when people don't understand it, it's because they don't they've never tried to emigrate to another country. Mm-hmm. They've never had the experience of being a Native American, being somebody who was born here and trying to go somewhere else, and seeing just how tough it is, and just how rigorous the process is, and just how little public services and money come in your direction if you don't get it. Mm. So it drives me crazy when I see people here taking my tax dollars, without going
Right
through
into it, and right after the break here, coming up with Brian Roberts, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about immigration and a lot more fun stuff in our last segment at Whiskey Politics. Thank you, sir. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics for our last segment. We're sitting here with Brian Roberts, and yeah, we totally lied, didn't we? Not at all political.
So I thought we were going to talk about Jack Nicholson almost killing me with a golf ball and, stuff like that.
Time out. What happened?
I'm a member of a golf club, and my very first day at the golf club, I'm standing over my ball, and this golf ball goes about half an inch past my head at about 200 miles an hour. And I turn around, it's Jack Nicholson, who's a member. And I was like, he goes, sorry about that. And then he just keeps on going.
No four, nothing?
No, nothing. No, that's not the way Jack was. Or the funniest day is when I was at the club and I turn around and I bump into Bill Clinton, and I'm surrounded by the Secret Service, and they're all drawing their guns and shit, and I go, what the? And he was there to play golf with Jack Nicholson, Joe Pesci, and I can't remember who else was in the foursome, and it was hilarious because he was there all day long. We were running around and hanging out, and Dweezil Zappa and I were in a cart, and Bill's like, "Hey, Dweezil, how you doing?" It was funny, and you know what? I'll tell you something. I think the hardest part of that day was Jack couldn't figure out a way to get stoned on the course because there's too much Secret Service and high-powered guns and whatever. But it's funny because it's those brushes with weird brushes with kind of the Beatles and whatever that have been sort of the theme of my life. Nobody really knows who I am, but I've had these wild experiences throughout. But anyway.
No. What happened with the Beatles?
Little me. I grew up as a drummer.
Yeah.
And I got a job on The Simpsons, and I was there day one, and experienced that whole thing. And that's a whole other thing. But Sam Simon came to me. I was the editor, and he said, "Brian, what do you want to do with your life?" I said, "I really want to direct." And he goes, "Well, you can't really direct on The Simpsons cartoon." He goes, "How'd you like to write?" Because I had written a best-selling book in L.A., and everybody had it, and everybody loved it. And so this is the shortcut book, yeah. Right. It was sort of the precursor to Waze.
Right.
And so anyway, when the story gets, I'm in the writer's room, the story gets kind of beat out that, that Marge had a crush on Ringo. Yeah. And so being a drummer, I always wanted to meet a Beatle. So I took the script home and I wrote it, and then I wrote a dream sequence with Ringo and Homer fighting over Marge. And of course they got it, and then they sent it off to Ringo, and Ringo says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be there in October. I'd love to do it." So he shows up, and I go to the recording session early. I blew up my poster, and it's just me. He shows up early, and it's just me and Ringo for 20 minutes hanging out and talking stuff, and I'm in hog heaven. He signs my poster "Love Ringo," and then we do the session, and of course, it had been really rewritten after Ringo agreed to do the show. It started out as 4 sentences, and he even said something. He goes, "Oh, it started out as 4 sentences, and now it's whole thing." Anyway, at the very end of the session, I turned to Sam and I go, "Hey, listen, let's get a couple of wild lines." And for people who don't know what wild lines are, that's just say anything, say, "Hello, how's it going, George? How you doing, Paul?" And John was dead, but So I go, maybe one day we'll stitch the Beatles together and kind of throw it as a one-off in Moe's Tavern. And I'll never forget Sam Simon, who's my hero, and he turns to me in the most sardonic look you could ever imagine. He goes, "Brian, no other Beatle is ever going to do this show." And then, of course, the next year George did it, and then the next year Paul did it. And if we had recorded those wild lines, little me from Orange County could have engineered a Beatles reunion at Moe's Tavern. It's kind of a throw-off. And to this day, it's sort of my biggest regret.
Yeah.
But it was kind of cool.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But I got to meet Ringo, and then I got chewed out by Matt for getting Ringo's autograph, because apparently, he doesn't sign autographs anymore, and they sent out 20,000 memos across the whole Fox lot.
Okay.
And I got a call from Matt, and he's like, "What do you mean? How'd you get Ringo's autograph?" I go, did you get the memo? I go, no, the recording session was over here in West LA. And 10 years later, they call me back to do the DVD commentary on Brush with Greatness was the name of the episode. And like, I'm talking about, because there was stuff based on my childhood growing up near Disneyland and all that kind of stuff. And then we get to Ringo and he goes, you got Ringo's autograph. I go, the guy's a billionaire. He's like chewing me out for anyway, the whole thing was a great experience. I mean, there's not many people that can say they were there the very second that the Simpsons theme was recorded at 20th Century Fox, when there was the chorus in one room, there was Danny Elfman in the entire 88-piece orchestra, and when we watched it roll out for the first time, like right out of the gate, it was just like, wow.
Were you there when Paul came in and George came in as well?
No, Paul was done on location. George was done on location.
Okay.
But the Michael Jackson one was pretty wild.
Okay. Because I gotta go back and start watching Simpsons.
Yeah. Well, the Michael Jackson episode. He really wants to do the Simpsons, and we do table reads where we read the script before an episode, and so I go to this huge table read. Michael's supposed to be there. Everybody's there, and I'm at the table, and then there's only one chair left, and it's sitting like literally like touching knees, and so he comes in, and he sits down right next to me, like I'm talking touching knees, elbows. That's how tight it was. And so I'm going, oh shoot, So I'm looking down at my script. I really don't want to look. It's kind of weird, whatever. But we're doing the show, and then at one point in the episode, he sings an a cappella version of "Man in the Mirror," and I go, okay, how many times in your life are you like touching knees with Michael Jackson and he's singing "Man in the Mirror"? I'm going to look. Wow. So I look up out of my script, and he wasn't singing. His sound-alike was singing right next to him. And that was just for the table read because he was so shy.
Sound-alike?
Yeah, the guy who did the California Raisins commercials and stuff like that. He had a sound-alike. Okay. And so anyway, he actually sang.
You had Michael Jackson there. Why is the sound-alike singing?
Hey, go ask Michael Jackson. It's a little cuckoo. But the funny thing is that he ended up singing it when we finally recorded the show. But at the table read, he was too shy to sing it. And by the way, the sound-alike did an amazing "Man in the Mirror." So those are great times. I mean, you never knew who was going to be on the show, and it was really, really hard, fun. I mean, I got the job, and they said, "Oh, it's going to be really easy. It's going to be 3 days a week," and then I never had a day off for like 4 years, and you know. But
another issue before I want to get back to some of the political stuff we were just talking about. But you're talking about Hollywood, and obviously a lot of the stuff has changed. The culture has changed. The technology has changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch all of my television streaming now. I cut the cord 3 years ago. I don't watch local anything.
Yeah.
So how is that impacting what you do on a day-to-day basis right now?
It doesn't really. It doesn't. Okay. Cutting the cord, all it really means, right now we're probably in the biggest television and television, especially of renaissance that we've ever been in, because everybody's fighting for that space. I mean, we used to call it broadcasting. These days it's narrowcasting, because now you can create your own channel. Mm-hmm. You can go to what you like. I just got into a big thing with a bunch of guys. We all love Ray Donovan. I go, what about Game of Thrones? Or what about, this or that? I go, and there's so many shows. I go, every year as a member of the Academy and the DGA, I get every movie and I get every TV show. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee there's 100 shows that I've never even heard of. And people are always coming to me and saying, oh, what about this show or that show? Yeah. We're living, so cutting the cord, the only thing it really has affected is the bottom line in budgets, which is probably why there's a lot of runaway production, because you've got to figure out now, like when I started in television, Max Headroom got canceled for having a 19 share, which was basically 20 million viewers. Mm-hmm. It got canceled for having that many people. Mm-hmm. Now
that's huge.
That's huge. Right. And I go, now if you're getting 1 to 2 million hits, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you're only getting 1 million hits and you're only getting this much revenue, you're going to have to bring down your production costs. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I did go to Canada in the very beginning, because I saw I saw viewers, like I ended on Raymond. Raymond was getting, 12, 15 million viewers or whatever at the end of the run. Everybody was making huge amounts of money.
In the late 90s?
No, it's 2002, 2004,
early
something like that.
Okay.
Early 2000s. But at the end of the run, Ray was making $2 million an episode. All the supporting cast were making $800,000 an episode, and it didn't take a lot of math to figure out. Okay, it's costing $12 million an episode to produce one episode of Everybody Loves Raymond, which is 22 minutes and 30 seconds long. I go, and I saw in the future, I go, this is the last of the Mohicans. I mean, this is like from here, it just it's going to go down, because now you have to get, like, where are you going to get the advertising revenue to support a show that costs $12 million every 22 and a half minutes?
Yeah.
It's really hard. It can be done, and some revenues have gone up, but I saw that the old model was going away, and that I had better look somewhere else where the model was working, that's where Canada works.
So I want to talk about Canada.
Yes.
Let's go back to, you were talking about immigration.
Healthcare.
You were talking about meritocracy, healthcare. And, okay, first and foremost, especially the right-of-center perspective of Canadian healthcare is negative. That, everybody comes over the border, they go to the Cleveland Clinic or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
Okay,
yeah.
What's your...
Can I tell you the truth?
Yeah.
Here's the truth. The Canadian system is brilliant. It works. I'm a member of a very conservative club. The golf club is very conservative. I keep trying to tell them, I go, hey, man, I just pick up the phone, I go see the doctor. If I need a CT scan, I do the thing. If I need this, I need that. I go, it's amazing. Not only is it well designed, meaning that every medical record is on a common platform, meaning that somebody in Vancouver can see your CT scans from whatever. It's all on a common platform. Like if you're here and you're at Kaiser South and Kaiser North can't even talk to each other. So in the Canadian healthcare system works. And this, I hate hearing, well, these are from people who have not been there. Okay, I can speak from firsthand experience. I go, the lines are not long. It's kind of like, when you give out tickets to a concert that's free and everybody hands out 10,000 tickets, and then only maybe 500 people show up. That's the same thing with Canadian healthcare, which is like, everybody's, I need a knee replacement. So everybody gets in line, but then they actually call you up and say, hey, we had it scheduled for 6 months from now, but what are you doing next week? Like they give out, everybody gets in line, but not a lot of people show up, or their plans change, they go on vacation, whatever. And I literally, they said, here's a script to go get a CT scan. I walked into a hospital. I got a CT scan in about 10 minutes. I was in and out of there quicker than I could pay for parking. And I go, it works. My prescriptions cost me about 50 cents. And I go, I don't understand why this is the third rail of American politics.
What is the problem here in the United States? California, the rates are through the roof. Everywhere, the rates are through the roof. People have absolutely gone crazy as far as taking a look at their premiums. And by the way, do you have a couple more minutes? Because we're finishing this episode up here for AVN, but I'd love to do a little bit more discussion on this.
Sure, yeah.
So, okay, so for folks that are watching on AVN, you can head on over to YouTube to finish watching this, because this is a really important topic. And, when everybody's opening their premiums and they're seeing their skyrocketing rates, and you've got to hit $13,000, $15,000 a year before the insurance starts to kick in here, and they're still paying $900, $1,200 a month for their premiums on a monthly basis. What is the issue here in the United States?
The issue is the United States, I'm sorry, has its head up its ass as far as healthcare is concerned. It's in every civilized country in the world. I am born third-generation Californian, and there for my DGA insurance, my DGA lifetime insurance, would I go in the same direction? Okay, the issue is that I do not understand. And this is, like I said, I'm a liberal, I'm conservative on some things. I go, if Ted Kennedy had not died before the crucial vote for universal health care, we would have it. Because if you remember, Ted Kennedy died, then there was a Republican voted in Massachusetts, and then we ended up with the worst of all systems, which is Obamacare. It's a what do they call a horse designed by a committee, an elephant. So it's poorly designed. The key with Canadian healthcare is everybody's on board. So when everybody's at the same level, I go, you can still choose your doctor, you can still do your stuff in Canada. I go, all this stuff that I hear about, how bad Canada is and how they want to jump over it's pure crap.
We're going to finish up over at YouTube for those that are watching America's Voice News. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again very soon with Whiskey Politics. And welcome back to Whiskey Politics. Let's call it Whiskey Politics After Hours. So you're continuing here on healthcare, and the problem that so many people have with it is that you're talking about this hybrid, this horrible ACA Obamacare. It's like the worst of both worlds. How much of that is the problem that the insurance company basically wrote that? I mean, they put them in a lobby room and they go for it, and this is what we got.
The problem is bigger than that. I go, yeah, did the insurance company write it? Sure. I go, the problem is that we didn't cross over the third rail of American politics. So the whole thing was, the problem with our whole political system is driven by special interests. So pick a side. The red side, the blue side, pick a side. It's all driven by special interests. So yeah, did the insurance people write it? Yeah. How did it get passed? Because it was sort of a poorly designed system. I go, the only way for us to really get over this is to just bite the frickin' bullet and say, we're going to universal health care. It'll be less expensive in the long run. You know, when I see people's premiums skyrocket, thank God I'm covered by union insurance. I'm a very lucky person. But if I had, you know, I've got a wife and 2 kids, I go, if somebody had, you know, an issue or whatever, and I'd had to pay these huge premiums, I don't know how people get along. I really don't. But in the Canadian system, by the way, I'll tell you a healthcare system that doesn't work. The Cuban system. So, I mean, you're more likely to be driven. 1 in 11 people in Cuba is a doctor.
So let's talk about that, because you're talking about 2 countries that are utilizing the socialism of the idea of healthcare, universal healthcare, everybody's covered. What makes Canada better? What makes Cuba worse?
Well, you know, Cuba was dictatorship. So you know, you're talking about a difference between a democracy and a dictatorship. And you know what made Cuba? We used to call it upside down world, because you know, as a musician, baseball player, you know, anybody in the arts or whatever, you got the best apartment. It was kind of like the old Soviet Union. You got the best apartment, you got the best of everything. But if you became a doctor, you were more likely to like drive a cab to make ends meet, because like I said, 1 out of every 11, I think 1 out of every 11 people in Cuba is like a doctor or some sort of you know, practicing. And I'm not talking, you know, they're brain surgeons, they're heart surgeons, they're specialists and things like that, but they can't make ends meet because the system doesn't generate. They don't have enough natural resources or infrastructure or tax-paying public to give those people enough money to make a living. Whereas Canada, you know, if you're a doctor, you don't make tremendous beaucoup dollars, but you make a really decent living, you know, comparatively speaking. And it's a system that's run differently. In Cuba, there was no infrastructure. There was no medicine, no access to medicine. There was no infrastructure for proper hospitalization. Even though they led the way in AIDS research and things like that in certain areas, and they prided themselves on that, it still was an oppressive dictatorship, as opposed to Canada, which is still a democracy. And it's, you know, people are given, you know, the Canadian healthcare system is being constantly given feedback and improvements. You talked about technological improvements in the entertainment industry. There's been technological improvements in the healthcare system in terms of information sharing. And I'm not talking about privacy issues. I'm talking about ease of transfer of records and, you know, just here's my OHIP card, they call it. Here's my health card. And then they have access to, like, okay, we got this number, so we can get that, we can get that, we can get that, we can get that. The layers of bureaucracy have been diminished where they're here. I'll give you a great example. So back in the United States, under my DGA plan, I go get a kind of a complicated blood test, and they go, that'll be $3,000. I go, $3,000, excuse me, that's $3,000 for blood test. Then they said, but by the way, you don't have to pay it. I go, well, wait a minute. It's a $3,000 blood test. Don't have to pay it. No. All I have to do is, it's a $3,000 blood test. All you have to do is submit the bill to the insurance company. They're going to deny it. Then they're going to send you a bill for $358. Which, by the way, don't pay that either. So I go, what's going on here? I go, why am I doing all this paperwork? Well, that's just the way the insurance companies work and this and that. And whereas, you know, in Canada, you need a blood test. The guy writes you a thing. You go get your blood drawn. Doesn't cost you any money. They send the blood over. They have the test instantaneously. They find out what's going on. The difference is they, instead of going right to, say, like a CAT scan, they'll maybe send you for an ultrasound first.
Okay.
And, you know, maybe they'll step you up. I mean, that's kind of common sense. Like, you know, if you got something wrong with your knee, let's get an ultrasound first. How's that look? Oh, you need a CAT scan. You need a CT scan. So they don't jump to the most expensive thing first. Here, I quite frankly, coming back here, I feel like I'm a stranger in a strange land. I don't understand how it all works. Like, how on earth can you give me a blood test that's $3,000 and tell me I don't need to pay the bill, it's just an insurance scam or whatever it is to set the price really high and then come back and give me a $300 bill, which, by the way, I don't have to pay. The strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. So people in the United States make fun of the Canadian system, and yet I am a native-born American, and I come back from Canada, and I can't make head or tails out of the American system. Like, why are people paying $1,000, $1,300 for premiums? For what? With a deductible that's huge. It can still break the bank.
I agree with you. I think that there's definitely some major problems with healthcare in this country, and one of the problems that I think from a free market perspective, and this is the pushback that I want to give you right now, is that when I take a look at a country, America, like Canada, it's 10th of the population of the United States.
Yeah.
And so when we start taking a look at 50 states that all have their own insurance companies per se, you can't cross state lines.
Oh.
The marketplace has basically become superficially inflated. The prices have been inflated because the insurance companies and the hospitals are essentially in collusion with this game that you're talking about.
Well, if you're looking for disagreement, you're not going to find it.
Right. So
I don't know what the pushback is.
The pushback meaning is that if I was to choose, it wouldn't be to go to the U.S. government or the state government to say, let's have a universal health care and turn it into a DMV type, one shop, for everybody. Listen, I'm a believer in privatization, and the less the government is involved, the cheaper things become, the more competition you have. All right?
So we might have a disagreement, only because when I hear sort of DMV style of healthcare, it's really not. Like, I think people...
Well, in Canada, it may not be. But the problem is that you have a country with 300+ million people.
Yes, versus 33, yeah.
And you have different... let's call it different states, different counties. Some are much more wealthier than others. Okay, so you're going to likely get much better health care in West Los Angeles than you are in Jackson or Tupelo, Mississippi.
So let me do a little pushback on you on two fronts. One is, first of all, they've got 1/10 of our population that's spread out over the same geographical area, landmass, which is actually quite a bit more difficult because the population's spread out. So it's just a matter of scaling up. If you have this program, it's just a matter of scaling up. I don't know whether America could do it right away or not right away. The other pushback I have on you was, can you just repeat you had two things.
Different provinces.
Oh, okay. Well, different provinces getting different levels of health care.
Right.
So I'm going to push it back to immigration. I go, if you could figure out a way to take these sanctuary cities and all the free services that they're handing out with my tax dollars all back, I'm sure you could find a lot of funds to put back into a universal health care system.
Amen.
I go, well, amen. I go, one is pulling from the other, and we're not. The reason why it's so damn expensive is because we're giving stuff away for free.
Okay.
So stop giving stuff away for free. Start having a systematic, a sensible immigration policy, and get people off of utilizing services for nothing. I go, I'd come to the United States if I didn't live here. If I could just jump, I could jump into a hospital and get free health care. I go, but it's crazy.
Free housing.
Yeah, but I can't get that in Canada as a Canadian citizen without my citizenship card. That's crazy.
The reason that I wanted to sit down with you is because you come across an extremely, very sane approach to things, and you are in an industry where there's a lot of people that have, like, just absolute visceral reaction to conservative ideas like this.
I don't think mine's a conservative idea, though.
It isn't. It's a classic liberal idea.
But here's the thing.
John F. Kennedy idea.
I go. Here's the thing. I live in a socialist country. I have lived in another socialist country for 3 years in Cuba. I go. I've lived there. And I go. These are not like. These are not like crazy ideas.
No, they're not. So how does a Gavin Newsom happen and 7 office holders in the Republican Party in the entire state of California?
Because I honestly think we live in a society right now where people are so suited up on. It's kind of like which beer do you like better? You know, Bud or whatever. Pick another Michelob. I go. We live in a red-blue society. It's like everybody wants tribalism. Everybody wants to pick a team. I go, people seem to forget that in order to fix things, you have to get kind of off your position and off your team and maybe accept an idea that you think maybe is like super liberal. And if you're liberal, you might have to accept an idea that might be conservative. But I go, the thing that's crazy to me is that John F. Kennedy wouldn't even get elected president today.
No, he wouldn't. He'd be considered
actually, I don't even think Clinton would get elected president now. And, you know, I was a big Bernie Sanders guy because Bernie Sanders at least said, hey, you know what? I'll give you another great thing. My son is getting ready to go to college, okay? In Canada, a tuition for a single year of college roughly runs about 15,000 Canadian, which is about $12,500. He's applied to a bunch of colleges here. Typical, all in $50,000 to $60,000 per year. Yep. No brainer, right? My son wants to come back to the United States. I go, well, okay, go ahead. You can load yourself up with a lot of student debt and graduate and whatever, and then figure your way out of it. It's his life. He can do what he wants. But in Canada, you can do a 4-year education and still have enough money left over for secondary education. And so Bernie was for 2 things, which was universal health care, and he was for, trying to figure out a better system of education, because we don't live in the age that I grew up in, which is you get a 4-year education, I graduated from UCLA Film School, went out into the world, blah, blah, blah. That's the way it worked. It doesn't work that way now. You could spend $250,000 in college education, and you graduate, you're at a $24,000 a year job, and there is no up there. There is no upward mobility. So I've actually told my kid, I go, maybe you should go to a trade school. Or the 2 richest people I know one started out as a sheet metal worker, and the other started out as a meter reader, and then they became real estate tycoons. Mm-hmm. I go, the upward mobility is completely different than what it was when I came up and when other people come up. The American dream is not attainable anymore at all, because you're not ever, if you spend $250,000 going to college and then, God forbid, you go to secondary whatever, you're digging yourself into a deeper hole.
Yeah, and sitting here, and I agree with so much of what you've said tonight, except for Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders, again, his answer to all of this is government control over this. The problem that you have with the reason, and I've got an 18-year-old who's about to go to college, and we're looking. He's 6 for 6 as far as applications goes right now. So I'm taking a look at these expenses, and I 40, 50.
Yep.
He ends up at Syracuse at $75,000 a year.
That's right.
Insane. So the problem is that because you've had the federal government essentially subsidizing the student loans, backing the student loans, it's created a supply and demand problem where the universities here are basically saying, look, we've got too many people applying, so we can increase the price.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So if you take government completely out of it, and this is my belief, if you take government completely out of it and just total free market, let some colleges fail that are not successful, but if the kids want to go, you're going to see a slashing of tuition.
I probably wouldn't disagree with that at all. Here's what pisses me off. You really want to get to what pisses me off is that I've been paying California taxes since I was 13 years old. And because my business took me to Canada, and now my kid's getting ready to go to California, he's an out-of-state international student, and I have to pay, whatever, a third or more than, and I'm still paying California taxes. So I go, how on earth are people have sanctuary cities and giving away services? I pay my taxes. I'm a California born and bred guy, and my kid, who through no fault of his own, had to go with me to Canada, and now as an international student has to pay more for his education. Riddle me that, Batman. And I go, I don't disagree with you at all. I go, free market should rule. What I am having an issue with is not actually the education system. That was sort of second on my list with Bernie. The thing that I'm having a problem with is that the way to get up the ladder in the United States is not the way that it used to be, which is we all think, oh, we need to get our kids a 4-year education, then they're going to do this, they're going to do that. I go, you could take that $250,000 or whatever you're going to spend, you're going to spend $300,000, you might as well hand it to them and say, go buy yourself a piece of real estate.
Yes.
Go buy a piece of real estate, don't go to college, and start your fortune here.
Absolutely.
Take $150,000, buy your first apartment building, then buy your second apartment building. Because I go, that's the way you're going to make it up the ladder. It's not. It's no longer the reward for how much money you spend to go to college is no longer there. And then unfortunately, everybody ends up underwater trying to get out from student debt, and that is just a recipe for trailer parks the rest of your life.
Brian Roberts, there's so much more we agree on than we disagree, and I think conversations like this, whether you're coming from a left or a right perspective, is when you sit down and have this dialogue, we can all kind of, figure it all out and figure out what the best solutions are without the epithets and the screaming that's going on right now in the media. Let me ask you, for our viewers that want to learn more about you, you got any shows? You working on things right now?
Right now, well, I'm in the middle of moving my family, but no, just finished a show called Let's Get Physical for the not the Up Network. Shoot. I forget the name of the network. Anyway, it's Let's Get Physical.
Nothing to do with Olivia Newton-John?
No, but Jane Seymour's in it.
Jane Seymour.
Jane Seymour, yeah. And I've got a few projects that are on the go, some movie projects, and that kind of stuff. And they can always look me up on my IMDb and say hello on my YouTube channel. Not my YouTube channel, but whatever, my video channel. I don't self-promote anymore. No, it's BrianKRobertsDirector.com.
BrianKRobertsDirector.com.
That's correct.
Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, man, my pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Hey, next time there better be whiskey.
Absolutely. And folks, you can continue to find us. If you haven't hit the subscribe button on YouTube, make sure you hit that with the notification bell. Find us on America's Voice News and all of your podcast applications, including Stitcher, Google Play, iTunes, and hit the 5-star button on iTunes. That way others can find us. And, of course, Ricochet.com. We'll be back again very soon. A very special thanks again to Brian Roberts. And thanks again for us at Whiskey Politics.